Hi! Have you heard of Prince's Rip Series rackets? Or have you played with any of the 2025 updated ones yet? In this video, I'll take you through the family of frames that make up the Rip Series, an ideal tweener racket for the modern game. Alright, let's get into it. Alright, so in this update, it features 6 new frames, 3 ripsticks and 3 ripcords. And of the 6, 4 of them share similar specs, but there's one main difference that sets them apart. So if you take a look at the ripstick line in this new bright red color, it does feature the O3 port technology, and it's a time-tested, proven technology that enhances spin, power, and comfort. And the ripcord in this nice bright blue color, it has the same benefits as the ripstick, but it has the traditional grommet design, and it has a slightly lighter head for more racket speed. So what I plan to do in this playtest and review, I'll explain my methodology, is I'm going to grab the 300 gram version of the ripcord and grab the 300 gram of the ripstick and then compare them to each other. Then next what I'll do is I'll grab the 98 head size, compare it to the 100, and give you my feedback on that. And in the end, I hope to give you a pretty good idea of what the Rip Series has to offer. As mentioned, I plan to playtest these rackets in this particular order, and I recommend doing the same if you demo them. I also highly recommend this demo process if you're trying the O3 port design for the first time. First, choose from the 280 or the 300 gram models of the ripstick and the ripcord. I picked the 300 gram models because I like weight. However, if you prefer a lighter frame, start with the 280 gram models. By playing with these two similarly spec'd rackets side by side, you can determine which will suit your stroke and game style. I've used this demo process for the past 4 years since the release of version 1 of the ripstick. With the ripstick, it's a love-hate scenario. Some players immediately loved it, while others didn't love it at all. So here's the bad news and the good news. Suppose you're one of those who don't love the ripstick. This is the perfect scenario to give the ripcord a shot, or suppose you're one of those who love the ripstick. Then this would be another perfect scenario to give the Ripstick 98 a shot and decide the right ripstick for you. Alright, so in this playtest I have the Ripcord 100 and the Ripstick 100, both in the 300 gram models. And if you watched any of my other reviews, what I'll do in the skills challenge is use a ball machine where I hit ground strokes, volleys, and eventually I'll hit some serves. So let's take a look at the first skills challenge, which was ground strokes. And this first one is really testing for depth and power. So on my forehand, I typically hit topspin. So for each of these that I'll talk about, you'll notice that I'll have a number 1 and number 2. If I gave it a number 1, I felt that was the one I liked better. All right, so I gave the Ripstick 100 number 1 here. Both of them had easy depth, but I liked the plush feel when I was going for more topspin. So that's why I gave this one a number 1. Now when it came to my backhand, because I hit a flatter shot, I'm calling it flat topspin, again going for depth and power, I gave the ripcord the number 1. Here because of the fact that when I was hitting a flatter ball, I did actually like that pop feeling. The pop feeling, as I would describe it, would be when the ball leaves the strings quicker. So that helped actually with the depth. So I liked it for my backhand since I hit a little bit flatter. Now for this next shot on my forehand, again I'm using topspin, but this is an angle shot where I was aiming the ball machine so that it would feed me a ball into the alley, and I was trying to hit a shallow angle to the opposite alley before the service line. And for both of these, I gave it a number 1 because I just felt like they were it was a toss-up. I just needed time to dial in because of the fact that it's an angle precision shot, and I was using like a forehand wiper swing to try and really get the ball to dip down. And so that's how I got that. However, when it came to my backhand, because I'm using slice and I was going for, again, the angle, but it was more of a touch shot, I felt like with the ripcord, I had a nice feedback on it whenever I swung slower. And with the Ripstick, I had a more muted feedback, but I couldn't give that either one a really decisive number one. So I declared this one a tie. And so if you take a look at just the ground stroke in itself, right now it's even. If I add up all the numbers here, it's 5 here and 5 here. So it was really a toss-up on the ground strokes. Next we have the volleys, and I was hitting deep first, so I was trying to aim in the back portion of the backcourt area. And I gave the Ripstick the number one ranking here. Whenever I was trying to swing a little bit faster, I felt more comfortable with the Ripstick. And whenever I hit a little bit off center, it was more forgiving. And that's why this one had a number two, because whenever I hit off center, I could definitely feel and hear it. So maybe I just needed to dial in more with the racket. But again, right off the bat, I just felt more comfortable with the Ripstick. Then when it came to the angle and touch shots, that's when I was trying to hit a drop volley angled, aiming for that ball hopper. I gave the Ripcord number one here because of the fact that I had a more connected feedback feel as opposed to a muted feedback feel. And because my game is, a lot of it is by touch, and I use a typical grommeted frame, I just felt more connected here because I like that feel. So that's why I gave this one number one. So again, if you take a look at just the volleys, you got 3 here and 3 here. So again, it's a tie. Then finally on my serves, I started off with some wide slices on the deuce, from the deuce court, and trying to hit spin. And I gave the Ripstick 100 the number one here. I felt like it had a more, it pocketed the ball and I could get more spin. However, the Ripcord was a very close second on that one. And then when I went to the ad court, I hit my topspin serve, again aiming wide and testing for spin. I actually liked the Ripstick for the fact that it had a higher launch, and because I could get more spin because of the pocketing, it was actually good for a topspin serve, because you want to get that ball high over the net and you want to get the spin to kick out. So, and for the opposite reason, I felt the Ripcord had less launch and less spin. Now, I don't typically hit flat serves these days because of my arm, and it's still not 100%, but just for fun, I thought I would hit some flat serves just to see how fast I could hit it. So, and of course, it had to go in. But eventually, when it did go in, the Ripstick came out ahead at 86 miles an hour here, and the Ripcord at 83. So if we take a look at all these numbers, it came out even on the ground strokes, even on the volleys, but the serves is where the Ripstick shined. So in the end, it was the Ripstick that came out ahead, 11-14. Well, that was a fun playtest between the Ripstick and the Ripcord. Now, although the Ripstick came out ahead, where I felt the Ripcord shined is whenever I was hitting that flat backhand. It had that pop sensation. So if you like that, I think you'll really like this racket. On the other hand, whenever I was swinging slow and trying to hit more touch shots, I just felt more connected with this because, again, I have a grommeted frame, so I just felt more used to that. But yeah, this is a very good racket. Now for the Ripstick, whenever I was swinging fast and trying to get more spin, I felt like that's when this racket shined. And it makes sense because it has the O3 ports, and that's what it's designed for. However, whenever I mentioned it had a muted feel, that's where players will either love or hate this racket, because it almost feels like it has a dampener, but yet it has more feel than having a dampener on there. So I can appreciate that because I don't use dampeners. So the next part of this playtest is I'm going to go ahead and put the Ripcord away and then grab the 98 Ripstick and then compare these two side by side. Now that I'm comparing the Ripstick 100 to the 98, I'm recommending this because of the fact that I started with the 300 gram model versus the 280, and going to a 310 model frame is not too much of a jump. I wouldn't recommend it if you're the 280 model user. So we're going to take a look at the skills challenge, and starting with the ground strokes for my forehand. I picked the 100 for its ease of depth and plush feel. When it came to the 98, I just felt like it forced me to hit more flat, and it took me more effort because I actually had to aim the ball higher to get the ball deep. As for my backhand, I picked the Ripstick 100 for the ease of depth and plush feel, same as the forehand. And same like my forehand on the launch angle. It had a lower launch angle, so I had to change the way I hit the ball to get the ball deep. So it didn't really complement my hitting style. Next we have the forehand topspin, where I tried to hit a dipping topspin, angle it into the alley shallow. And this is where I felt that 98 was actually better because of the fact that it had a lower launch angle. I felt like I could control the spin dipping it into the court, whereas the 100, I could get it eventually, but it did take me a little bit time to dial in. Then finally on my backhand where I hit slice, it was the same angled shot, but I was using more of a touch shot where I had to slow down my racket head speed. I felt between these two rackets it was a toss-up. So far on the ground stroke, it's the Ripstick 100 that's in the lead. Alright, so next I hit my volleys, and I started with depth and power. And this is where the 98 was right from the beginning. It felt more stable and easy depth, and it had a lot to do with the heavier weight in the frame, and I believe the swing weight was higher, so it's closer to what I'm used to. It was still more forgiving though on the 100 when you hit off center, so that was good there. When I hit my angle touch shots, I felt like between the 98 and the 100, it was a toss up. They both had the muted feedback feel, and so if I tally up the volleys, it's the 98 that's ahead on this one. All right, so finally on the serves, I did the same with the slice out wide on the deuce court. I liked the Ripstick 100 earlier because of the pocketed ball feel for more spin. And the 98 just had less dwell time, so I really couldn't get the same spin that I was getting with the 100. So I gave the 100 the number one here. Then for the topspin on the ad court, going out wide, I really liked the Ripstick 100 because of the fact that it had a higher launch angle and I could get more spin, so it stayed in. And for the opposite reason, this came out at number two because there was less launch and spin. Then finally I hit a flat serve with both of the rackets, and it was the 100 that I had 86 earlier, and I got another 83 with the Ripstick 98. So after tallying all the numbers for both of these rackets, it's the Ripstick 100 coming out ahead again, 11-14. Now that I've narrowed down my Ripstick of choice as the 100, I did want to say that the 98 is not your typical 98 head size racket. Because of the O3 ports, the sweet spot actually feels bigger than the actual head. I did like it on the volleys because of the extra weight. So with the 100, I did like it on the ground strokes, I liked it on my serves, but for the volleys, all I need to do is add a little bit of weight to the head and my Ripstick will be ready. Earlier in the video I mentioned there's 6 new updates in this Ripstick and Ripcord line, and the racket I was missing was the Ripcord 100 in the 265 gram version. But I wanted to point out similarities and differences in these two lines of rackets. So these that I highlighted were the 4 that I mentioned earlier that share similar specs. And when I say similar, it's because of the static weight at 280, 300, 280, and 300. So we'll take a look at each of the specs and I'll point out the similarities and differences. This next column is just simply the conversion into ounces. Then when we take a look at the RA stiffness, they all come in at 67, so that's all the same there. Now the swing weight is where they will differ. So if you take a look at the Ripcord and their counterparts, the swing weights are lower here compared to the ones up here. Prince did that for a reason. This Ripcord line is touted as the maneuverability line and the Ripstick for power. So it makes sense that the swing weights are lower here. Now finally we'll take a look at the string pattern and the beam width. On the beam width they're all 27 at the head and 22 at the throat. 27, 22, so they're all the same here. And that's part of Prince's constant taper system, and so that's consistent. And the string pattern though is different. So you'll notice that it's a more open string pattern here with a 16 by 18, and you have the 16 by 19 here, which is a pretty popular string pattern among other brands. The one racket that wasn't mentioned much was the Ripcord 100 in the 265. Well, it didn't help that I didn't have the racket, but it definitely has its place within the Ripcord line of rackets. And if you take a look at the specs of this racket, it's the ideal racket for a junior player transitioning into an adult racket for the first time. So we want to make sure we don't leave that one out. I did want to point out one thing about the Ripstick 98, and it is a new addition to the Ripstick line, and I think it's a good one. I did demo it after I tried the 100 and liked it, but it's also an ideal racket to demo if you're a 90 head user of another brand. Next, I wanted to share an observation that I made while stringing the Ripstick rackets and a quick stringing tip. For most stringing machines, because of the 360 rotational feature, that the tension head is lower than the racket itself. So what's going to happen is as I pull each string, and I'll go ahead and, I already did some, but I'll go ahead and just pull it so you can see what's happening as each string. It's mainly the cross strings when you're dealing with these 03 portholes. I'm going to go ahead and lock my turntable, and you can already see that the angle of this pull is at a downwards angle. So what's happening on the outside of the frame is that the strings are being seated, or is resting at the bottom half of the 03 portholes. You can see that there, and I'll turn it around. I did some over here, so you can see that right there. I will finish this racket and I'll show you how I can pop this back in play. Good thing is that at 12 o'clock you can see that I didn't do anything, but it's just seated very nicely right here. So I'll go ahead and finish this racket and I'll show you at the end what I'm going to do to remedy this situation. Alright, so I just finished stringing a racket, and I wanted to show you on this side of the racket. You can see that it was mounted this way, so you notice that the string are all on the bottom side of the 03 porthole, and on this side it's more centered, because what I did is I ended up pushing the string into the center of that 03 port. So I'll go ahead and demonstrate what I did. So I have each of these strings here, and I just had to push it down, and it does fortunately move into place. I'm assuming it'll work with other kinds of strings. I just strung this at 52 pounds on a hybrid, but I got it more or less centered, so that looks like the proper positioning of where the string should rest. But again, I'm just wondering, maybe this is just for the first stringing that it has to be done this way, and after that it'll form a groove where the strings can just seat itself where it should belong. But I'm thinking it's pretty important that the strings are centered, especially on the initial string job, to make sure that future string jobs will be resting in the right place. Let's say you're a user of a racket from another brand and you want to try out some of these new Ripsticks and Ripcords. So I have a list of comparable rackets listed for each of these frames. So for the Ripstick 98, I have the Babolat Pure Drive 98 and the Yonex E-Zone 98, and I tried to pull the most current versions, and this data is from Tennis Warehouse. So if you take a look at the specs, they are going to be higher because their specs are unstrung rackets. So I looked for the similarities in static weight, stiffness, swing weight as close as I could get, and then the string pattern, it is what it is, and the beam width, and I'll talk more about that later. The next Ripstick is the 100 and the 280 gram, and we have the Babolat Pure Drive Team and the Yonex E-Zone 100L. And for the Ripstick 100 and the 300 gram model, we have the Head Extreme NP and the Babolat Pure Aero. I wanted to make sure I'm not going to leave out the Ripcord 265 in the 100 head size. So I have the Babolat Pure Aero Light and the Yonex E-Zone 100 SL. Then next we have the Ripcord 100 and the 280 gram weight, and we have the Babolat Pure Drive Team and the Yonex E-Zone 100L. And finally, the Ripcord 100 and the 300 gram weight. I have the Head Extreme NP and the Babolat Pure Aero. Now, each of these rackets here listed for the 280 and the 300, you'll notice it's similar to the ones I had here. It's because the specs were close enough that I thought I would list it for both. But what makes the Prince rackets really stand out, I think, is the CTS. And again, I mentioned how the beam goes from the tip of the head, the 27, to the throat, 22. So if you look at the other brands, they all have what I call a dual tapered beam. So with the Babolat, you'll notice that it's thin at the top, thick in the middle, and thin at the throat, and it's symmetrical. So you'll notice that the Babolat here, this one here, even the arrow light here, it's symmetrical, meaning that the tip and the throat is the same. But what was interesting is the yonex and the head is that it starts off thin, it goes a little bit thicker, and then thinner at the throat. And it's the same for the head. So I'm not sure exactly what that does in terms of the feel. I'm sure it does affect the feel, but in the end, you need to go out and demo these rackets and try them out for yourselves. Now, with all this talk about demoing the Rip Series rackets, here are 3 ways you can get them in your hands. 1, if you live in Hawaii and want to try any Prince racket, contact me about my custom demo program and email me at amstringing.com. 2, if you're in the mainland US and you need assistance locating a local Prince dealer, I'm here to help. Email me your city and state. And 3, if you live far from a local Prince dealer, check out the Tennis Warehouse demo program. Thanks for watching, play with Prince, and let your Rip Series play.